You know, when you look back through history, you find these massive, world-changing wars. And the reasons they supposedly started, they sound completely nuts, almost like a joke. But the stories themselves, as wild as they are, aren't the real lesson. The real lesson is what's hiding just underneath.
I mean, for real, could a major international incident, we're talking naval blockades, cannon fire, could all of that really be triggered just because a few soldiers trashed a French chef's bakery in Mexico City?
Or how about this one? Could two of the biggest empires on the planet, the United States and Great Britain, seriously come to the brink of war? I mean, warships pointed at each other, cannons loaded, all over a single dead pig that was stealing potatoes?
And maybe the weirdest of all, what about starting a massive bloody war that killed thousands over a captain's severed ear, an ear that he kept in a jar and presented to Parliament years after it was cut off?
Well, the wild thing is, the answer to all those questions is yes. These wars really did happen. But here's the twist. The pastry, the pig, and the ear, they weren't the real reasons. They were just the perfect excuses.
So, to really get how this all works, we need to dig into this idea of a pretext. That's the official story, the justification a country gives when, let's be honest, they've already decided they're looking for a fight.
Yeah, there's even a fancy Latin term for it, casus belli. It literally means an occasion for war. So think of it like this. It's the official trigger. It's that one specific thing a government can point to and tell its people, see, that's it. We have no choice. We have to go to war now. And this is the absolute key to understanding all of this. The excuse, that casus belli, it's always simple. It's emotional. It's designed to make you angry. A story about a national insult that gets everyone fired up. But the real reason? Oh, that's always way more complex. It's strategic, it's about geopolitics, it's about territory, and, as we're about to see, it's very often about money. All right, let's jump into some real-world examples. And you're going to see a pattern here pretty fast. When big countries start rattling their sabers, a good rule of thumb is follow the money. Okay, first up, the so-called Pastry War from 1838. So the story they told the world was this. A French chef named Monsieur Remontel had his little pastry shop in Mexico City trashed by a mob, and the Mexican government refused to pay for the damages. Sounds simple, right? Well, the real story was that Mexico was a young, pretty unstable country at the time, and it had defaulted on massive, massive loans owed to France. And really, to see how this was all a setup, you just have to look at the numbers. The chef's original claim for his entire ruined shop was 60,000 pesos. Look, that's a lot of money for a baker, for sure, but it's not exactly the kind of thing you start an international war over.
But then, get this. By the time the French Navy shows up and starts blockading Mexican ports, the bill has suddenly jumped to 600,000 pesos. That's a tenfold increase. See, the pastry shop was never the point. It was just the perfect little crowbar that France could use to pry open Mexico's treasury and force them to pay up on all those other much bigger debts.
All right, next up, the wonderfully named War of Jenkins Ear. The official story is absolutely gruesome. A British sea captain, Robert Jenkins, gets caught by the Spanish Coast Guard, who slice off his ear as a punishment for smuggling. Awful stuff. But the real reason for the war? It was all about a brutal rivalry between Britain and Spain over who was going to control the insanely profitable trade routes in the Caribbean. And here is the absolute smoking gun that proves the ear was just a prop. The guy's ear was cut off in 1731, but the war didn't start until 1739. That's an 8-year gap. That ear was literally kept in a jar, saved, until the political timing was just right in London to parade it around, get everyone furious, and justify a war that the powerful shipping merchants had wanted for years for purely economic reasons.
So, okay, it's not always just about cash. Sometimes the silly excuse is used to cover up a fight over something even more basic: land. Dirt and water. Who owns what and who gets to control it?
And that brings us to the fantastic Pig War of 1859. So the excuse is almost comical. An American farmer shoots a pig that belonged to a British guy because it kept eating his potatoes. The real issue, though, was that both the United States and Britain claimed these really important islands, the San Juan Islands, and nobody had ever actually agreed on where the border was. So that one dead pig nearly started a real shooting war over a massive chunk of territory.
And this whole thing could have blown up
big time. The only reason it didn't was because of some cool heads in the military on the scene. The British commander, Rear Admiral Robert Baines, was actually ordered to attack the Americans, and he refused. He famously said he would not involve two great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. Just a rare moment of common sense that stopped a total disaster. And for our final example, we have the Kettle War, which might be the most ridiculous one of all. The official reason for the conflict was a single cannonball fired from a Dutch ship that hit a soup kettle on the deck of an enemy ship, and that ship surrendered. That was it. But the real fight was about an economic blockade that had been going on for ages. The Dutch controlled the entrance to the super important river, the Scheldt, which was basically strangling the economy of the Holy Roman Empire. The emperor wanted it opened, and this war was the result. You heard that right. The only casualty of the entire Kettle War was a soup kettle. And yet, that one totally harmless shot was all it took. It sent a clear message about how serious the Dutch were, and it ended the immediate standoff, even though the huge economic problem was still bubbling away just under the surface. Okay, so after going through all these wild stories, you start to see it, right? There's a clear pattern here. There's a simple, repeatable formula for how you use a tiny little incident to kick off a huge conflict.
It's pretty much the same playbook every time. Step 1, some small local thing happens. A pig gets shot, a bakery gets trashed. Step 2, the politicians and the newspapers grab that story and blow it way out of proportion. They frame it as this terrible national insult that we just can't ignore. And then Step 3, they use all that manufactured anger as the perfect excuse to launch a massive military operation, one that, surprise, surprise, achieves a big strategic goal they've wanted to accomplish for a long time.
Because that's what it comes down to. When you peel back the layers of these silly stories, you find the same old serious reasons for war. It's about money, it's about controlling trade, it's about grabbing land and resources. And that's really the main takeaway here. The excuse they feed to the public, the pig, the pastry, the ear, it can sound completely ridiculous. But the real reason they're willing to go to war, that's always deadly serious. So that leaves us with one final thought. The next time you see a conflict brewing and you hear the official story for why it's happening, you have to ask yourself, am I being told the excuse or am I being told the real cause? Because as we've seen, history shows those two things are almost never the same.